Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Chilluminati podcast, episode 326. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Mike Martin, joined by my own two personal little Victorian boys.
That's us.
Jesse and Alex.
Oi, sir, this microphone sure does hurt me throat. The first ever microphone, sir. It hurts me, sir. It does.
I don't have a microphone, sir, but 2 tin cans and string I
have. My vision's blurring, sir. What do you mean you want me to play Spider-Man? All right.
My mummy sold me for gruel.
Honestly, keep that keep that method acting in mind for the whole episode. We're going to be in that mindset all episode, a young Victorian child's mindset, which you can find at patreon.com/ I don't know really know where to go from there to get to Patreon.
Young Victorian children over at patreon.com/Chilluminati.
You know what? A lot of overlooked, absinthe addicted, opium den lounging.
Yeah, that's really the vibe over there. Opium den. Yeah.
You know what would have kept all those brilliant minds out of the opium dens is if they had some sort of crowdfunding website.
Patreon would have done it? That's right.
Would have kept them out of it. Yeah.
Patreon would have given them their own sort of made up job that turned their interests into a job. And, you know, I don't know. Go there for us. Support us. Keep us out of the opium dens. And in return, you'll get all kinds of great stuff. Like we just watched Age of Disclosure, which, let me tell you something. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to spoil the film, but I already have spoiled the film. You've already heard me say every word that's in the film.
In fact, if you listen to Chilluminati, you know more than what's in that film.
Your brain is already so mega mind that you don't need to watch this movie, but
you can listen to us.
If you want to, yeah, you can.
If a bunch of you want to team up together and pay for it one time instead of what we did and pay for it 3 times, you can
$25.
$25 a pop.
It's not. Look.
Just in case you want to watch it again,
it's not worth $25.
No,
it was 20 to rent it for a day.
Yeah, so, 20 to rent it for a day, 25 to just own it Ultra HD 4K.
Yeah, now
8K.
I own it, which is great.
I can show it to my parents when they ask me about what a UFO is in the broadest possible sense. I can show them that.
It's the most like 6 or 7 out of 10 movie if it was free, and 3 out of 10 because you have to pay for it.
I was about to say, the free is important though.
I thought I legit logged on to Prime thinking that it was going to be part of my subscription to Amazon Prime. But it was not. It costs more than 2 months of Amazon Prime.
Luckily, that's not what today's about. No aliens today.
We have a show called Rotten Popcorn. It's on Patreon. If you go there, you can get our watch-along commentary of this entire film, which you can watch along with the film to make it something more entertaining than what it actually is, which is a big burger with nothing in between the buns.
I really liked it when Lou Elizondo was our teacher with the blackboard.
I don't know why it's so unfortunate that happened with Lou Elizondo before this movie came out. I would have been at least like honking its horn. You know what I mean? I would have been at least like telling people, hey, go watch this. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to know what's up, go watch this. But now I can't even do that because if you Google the guy who is the narrator of the entire movie, the first thing that comes up is him like faking
showing a
alien.
Picture of like a literal crop
and being like
it's a UFO.
You know?
Yeah, you never know. Oh no, that's not fuck. Oh god, yeah. What a disappointment that movie was. But bright side, new Neil Breen movie on the way out. So
yeah. And get ready for more rotten popcorny
we're all excited
things.
for Neil. Okay.
Yeah. I'm so glad you've come around on Neil Breen.
Oh no, I haven't come around. It's terrible, but I'm excited to hurt myself. I like hot food. I like spicy peppers. A little pinch and squeal.
Yeah.
And Neil Breen. And young Victorian children.
Thank you to today's sponsor, Cash App. And I've been using Cash App for a while now. And honestly, it's kind of been a game changer for my managing of my money. One of my favorite features is the ability to personalize my Cash App card. It's so much more fun than a boring debit card. And trust me, what I need in my life is way more fun. Like so much more. I read about serial killers and stuff. And if I could add the perfect discount to my Cash App card, it would definitely be my favorite coffee shop, which is any fucking coffee shop that will give me coffee. Cash App just released a new status program for the way people actually spend called Cash App Green. It unlocks new ways for you to pay, get rewarded, and easily grow and manage your money on your terms. Now, when you spend at least $500 a month with the Cash App card or Cash App Pay, you earn green status, which unlocks benefits like up to $200 of free overdraft coverage, higher borrow limits, and custom personalized cashback offers every Friday at places that you love to shop. Turn everyday spending into status with Cash App Green. Download Cash App today or visit cash.app/new to learn more about this and other great features launching now. For a limited time, new Cash App customers can earn $10 if they use code CashApp10 in their profile at sign up and send $5 to a friend within 14 days. Terms apply. Cash App is a financial services platform, not a bank. Banking services provided by Cash App's bank partners. Prepaid debit cards are issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC. Cash App Green, overdraft coverage, borrow, cashback offers, and promotions are provided by Cash App, a Block Inc. brand. Visit cash.app/legal/podcast for full disclosures. So what are you waiting for? Download Cash App today and start turning your everyday spending into rewards.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's all the same. It's all one thing.
I get you. I get you.
It's
a
like
little
the catfish. It's like the catfish in the barrel with all the regular fish to keep.
I like
things.
to date people with obvious red flags.
Yeah.
Right. I like to hurt myself.
I like to.
Well, let's put that emotional packaging away. And let's get into the episode today. Sorry. Thank you.
Sorry, sir.
Get back into your improv acting. Back into your Victorian mindset. Because here, we're actually, before I even tell you what this is about.
Fingers to get to the bobbins and the gizmos.
I'll put some fat betwixt me breads. I did.
Right. Now, let's put
bread between me breads.
Let's say now it's February 19th, 1838. Right, you're a little older than you are right now. You're than your Victorian child, rather. You're an 18-year-old girl named Jane Alsop.
Okay, let me change. Let me.
Oh, I'm Jane Alsop. I am.
Oh, yeah. Hold on. I got you. It's me, Jane Alsop.
Yep, it's us.
I'm like
18-year-old girl.
You see, that's the mark of a good actor is that we can change it up. Like,
yeah, it's crazy how talented you are.
Yeah,
you can't. You'd be shocked if those two characters met. You'd be like, is that two different people?
First of all, hard to believe that's us talking, right?
Right.
First of all, hard to believe it's us talking. Second of all, no, they're not English. They're American. We were both the orphans and the girl. That was
You're
us.
18 years old, and you live in a cottage between the villages of Bow and Oldford, which is just outside London. Lonely little spot, and your nearest neighbors are far enough away that if you needed to scream for help, they probably would not hear you.
That's worth putting on a house ad. Like how far? Like
I feel like in this time, so
yeah, in the Victorian times, if I feel like. How far away somebody who can help you is probably like worth talking about up front.
Yeah, probably, honestly.
We need to go back a minute. Your story's unimportant. Alex just said, when looking to get are you implying that during this time period, people were like, you gotta contact my I'm sorry,
bro.
I have to contact my real estate agent.
If all you've ever heard of Victorian times. If all you ever heard of Victorian times is from this show, it's the most dangerous, scary fucking time that there is in history. And everything that is now a fantasy was real back then. Like,
do you think that we now know fix that?
Sure, but so
do you think that today's episode will change your opinion about how scary this time period was?
I think that I have no real idea what this episode is about other than like a sentence that you told me last night. So I'm just going to,
I have a Victorian Cryptid for you.
But you're still, the implication is that during this time, real estate agents would have to be upfront about various cryptids and or distances between other homes and said cryptids and help that you could get.
I think Alex is saying, it's a dangerous time. Not knowing how far away your closest neighbor is in case you needed help for any reason would be important to know.
I'm pretty sure that I feel like it drives the cost down, like down if you're remote in the Victorian times, whereas today, remoteness usually means that it's quite.
Well, if you're remote, usually because you have a farm and you're part of like the whole, economy.
Well, that's also true. That's another.
All this is proving is that none of the three of us know what the hell happened in the Victorian era. We don't know a damn thing about it.
All I know is that I'm never going to own a home. And I've lived in the same apartment that I've lived in ever since I left college before I graduated because it was too expensive. And I just paid off my college loan last year.
Yeah.
I am
We don't know what it's like to talk to a realtor. What are you talking about?
Yeah. What are you talking about?
Okay, so 1838, February, you're Jane Alsop. It's late. It's like 8:45 at night, but back then it's like pitch black at that point because in 1838, street lamps are few and far between out here away from London. You're inside with your family when suddenly there's this violent banging on your front gate. Okay. Not a polite, knock at your front door, just a jangling of your front gate. Someone is just hammering away at it like they're trying to break in.
We're talking about
go over to the door,
aggression.
And you open the door, you take a look what's going on out there, and what you see is a man standing outside in the darkness. He's very clearly agitated, and he says, here, give me your best grumpy old British Victorian man who's saying this to the girls, okay?
For God's sake, bring me a light, for we have caught Spring-Heeled Jack here into line.
Oh, no. He's here.
That was hard for me to understand. But
you told me to do that.
Yeah, well, I
hold on. You want another one?
Yeah, go ahead and give me another one.
All right. All right. Take two. For God's sake, bring me a light, for there we've caught Spring-Heeled Jack we have here in the line.
Good. You know what? Better. How do you think, Alex? What would you rate that?
I would call it legible. Legible.
Yeah, good.
Legible.
This guy that's grumpy and whispery and hard to hear, it looks like he's wearing a policeman's cloak. His voice is urgent. And so you do what any young, helpful woman in 1838 would do. You grab a candle.
Lock the door. Oh.
You grab a candle and you bring it out to him. And the moment you hand him that candle, everything goes wrong. He throws off his cloak. He holds the candle up to his chest. And you see that he's wearing a white suit that looks like skin tight, and almost gleamed in the candlelight. He's got a massive helmet on his head, and his eyes are reflecting the light like an animal's eyes go, like you would with a flashlight in the woods. And you see that reflection of the light in their eyes. Have you ever like a raccoon or anything like that?
Yeah. Even dogs and cats have it pretty much. Yeah.
And then he opens his mouth and vomits forth blue and white flames directly into your face.
Bloodborne boss.
What?
Yeah, Bloodborne boss.
No question.
However, it's not burning you. You're just frozen in fear. Your brain can't really process what you're seeing.
Not because of the flames.
Well, partially psychologically because of the flames, but the flames aren't
freezing flames.
Yeah, she's not having to make like a willpower save to resist a hold person spell here.
Right.
Whatever's before you clearly isn't human, and before you can scream, he lunges at you. His hands, they're not hands, they're actually claws, metal claws, and they grab you by the neck in your dress. He then shoves your head under his arm like he's trying to pin you in a wrestling match, and he starts tearing at your clothes with the claws, ripping at your dress, tearing it to shreds. And your sisters in the house hear you scream. One of them is too terrified to move when she actually sees him. But the older sister, Susan, if you can't tell, this is actually a legend that actually is told, runs out and manages to drag you back inside to the house. You collapse, the dress is destroyed, your hair's been ripped out, the combs that were in your hair are gone, and you can barely speak because you're shaking so much.
Combs were even gone.
Yeah, because you have little combs in your hair and stuff back in the Victorian times that make it look a little pretty.
Right.
And those are all gone.
Like when a cartoon character gets like hit in the face with a hammer and all their shit flies off.
yeah, exactly. But the metal claws are just going like crazy, like Edward Scissorhands.
So so it's not a Bloodborne boss. It's like a Bloodborne like PvP. It's like a guy. It's like a dude. Yeah.
And the thing is, he doesn't even leave after you get inside. He stands outside your door and just knocks on it loudly, violently, 2 or 3 times. And it's only when your family starts screaming for the police from the upstairs window that he finally leaves, not walking or running, but leaping and scampering across the fields like a giant bunny hop. Because today, we are talking about the legend of Spring-Heeled Jack. This is a Victorian boogeyman who terrorized England for 67 years. And the fire-breathing devil who could leap over 9-foot-tall walls, the phantom who attacked young women in the darkness and vanished like smoke. The question we'll be left with and hopefully answer is, was this an actual historical figure that legend had been laid mythological powers on, like a bored aristocrat that was just terrorizing women?
67?
67 years of like
67?
running. Yeah.
So that's like Zorro type shit.
Was
that's
he
like That's like a legacy hero.
Was he a mass delusion that like somehow left real victims in his wake, or was he an actual superhuman entity that caused problems? Before we dive into the details, just shout out to the two main sources that I used for this episode. The article Spring-Heeled Jack to Victorian Bugaboo from Suburban Ghost by Mike Dash in Fortean Studies from 1996. And then the book The Legend of Spring-Heeled Jack, Victorian Urban Folklore and Popular Culture by Carl Bell. That book in particular is he dives into the history of where Spring-Heeled Jack even comes from. And a lot like how we talked about the Jersey Devil is how I'm very much approaching this episode as well. And back when we did the Jersey Devil, I remember there was a couple of Reddit posts talking about there's like some art out there of the Jersey Devil and Spring-Heeled Jack fighting. And I remember it was like a really sick poster art. It was sick. All right. So before we dive into the meat in this thing, obviously what we need to talk about, as we usually do, is how terrible London was in 1837, because the problem with every Victorian era movie or TV show you've ever seen is you see the nice side of it all. They show you those gaslit streets with fog swirling around, proper ladies and gentlemen dressed in the nines, and maybe like a Dickensian like street urchin like Oliver running around asking for, please sir, more food, the stuff that you were doing early.
I know the vibes, yeah.
But the reality was a nightmare. The air stank to high heaven. Like, that's the first thing you have to understand about Victorian London. It smelled like coal smoke mixed with horse manure mixed with human shit. Because
weren't there like lamps that were like coming out of the sewers that was just like burning off like fart gas from like shit and piss and fart and dead shit?
I don't know specific. We'll talk about like what that was like. A myth,
like
almost.
A small note you would find in an Eldritch horror game when you went to a town that was called like Innsmouthburg. Yeah. And it was like,
they're called fart lamps, me lord. They burn off the farts of the old ones down beneath the city, they do. I think it's just our shit.
People they are, my lord.
Where's my family? I went crazy. I'm hallucinating.
That's every horror video game.
Yeah. But
there's a
also
picture
you found that in like children. A little recording somewhere.
Yeah. This is like the 1830s. We're still at a time of night soil collectors, which were people that would go house to house gathering buckets of shit to sell to the farmers.
Hell yeah.
And the Thames was like a flowing toilet that occasionally caught fire from all the industrial chemicals that were being dumped into it at this point in time. Like,
kind of metal.
There was no safety regulations.
No, I don't think there's any. Like maybe fragments of metal.
Kind of lit. Like fast forward to today, dude's throwing magnets into the Thames, pulling out
pulling up shit.
Shredded out shit. Yeah. Pretty lit.
And when you walk down the street at night, you could hear your own footsteps echoing on cobblestone, which would then eventually be drowned out by the hissing of the gas lamps when there even were gas lamps around. Again, you really only got a lot of those in the inner London area.
Hear me out. Ass lamps.
Ass lamps. Because they're constantly letting
out fart gas from underneath the city.
I love that.
The poop.
Perfect.
Ass lamps.
But like the sound of them hissing. Do you guys you've had a gas lamp around before? I used to have them a lot when I lived out. And like the constant hissing noise, except it's multiple lamps all making that noise all the time around you. If you're like have the lamps at all around. And it meant that even when you couldn't see anything in the darkness, you could still hear that something was burning nearby, consuming fuel. It was a weird time. London in 1837 was an industrial hellscape that was growing faster than the infrastructure could actually handle. The population at the time was exploding. Over 2 million people were crammed into a city that had medieval foundations still. And like I said, the Thames was an open sewer. Cholera outbreaks were regular occurrences, and the streets at night were genuinely dangerous in ways that are really hard for us to comprehend today. Like, we talk about how dangerous the streets are and crime rates, but at this, like, it's really hard to fucking wrap your head around how dangerous that time period was at night, especially for women, like, by and large.
I'll give you a factoid. Every single one of the women, someone hurt them, okay? But did not come because they were used to it. Just think about that.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't weird to hear somebody screaming for help in the middle of the night, ever. Because it was always happening.
Right. At some point, your brain takes trauma and it's like, this is normal now. And like it becomes part of the background noise. And the lighting, why I'm talking about is because it's kind of crucial to understanding why Spring-Heeled Jack could operate the way he did. Gas street lamps were only 30 years old by the time this is taking place. 1807 is when they were introduced. And then each lamp put out less than a modern 25-watt bulb, and they were spaced 65 meters apart, which is about a little over 200 feet between each lamp. So you'd have these little pools of like weak yellowish light and then massive stretches of darkness in between, even in the city.
Right.
And in the suburbs, places like Barnes or Bow or Old Ford, the areas where Jack operated, supposedly, the lighting was even worse or straight up non-existent. You're talking about dark, narrow lanes bounded by high hedges, loads of unpaved roads that would eventually turn into mud when it rained, and isolated cottages with no neighbors in shouting distance, something that realtors should tell people before they buy their homes. Now, add to the fact that the Metropolitan Police had only been founded in September of 1829. The cops were 8 years old. That's it. The cops were barely a thing.
Not,
Isn't that crazy to think about?
Like city cop vibes, like brand new baby city cops figuring out how to do it.
Yeah, doing their best. This is 8 years before Spring Heel Jack shows up, and the force was barely functional. Drunkenness was rampant among new recruits. Of the 2,800 officers serving in May of 1830, only 562 were still on the force 4 years later. That's 80%-ish turnover rate of cops coming in and then being filtered straight out. And like, you might have this romantic idea, or the viewers might have this romantic idea that these cops were like looking like Sherlock Holmes. These fuckers were not Sherlock Holmes. They didn't even have a detective branch until sometime in the 1840s.
They look like the dudes. They look like, those like big blue coats with the big buckle.
Yep. Yeah. Yep, that's exactly like the kind of vibes you're getting. They're still like trying to figure shit out, and anybody's getting hired, and everybody needs a job, and like there's really not a lot of pay, and it's very violent and dangerous. And a lot of working class Londoners at this time didn't trust the cops. The Bow Street runners had handled actual criminal investigations, and many people saw the new Metropolitan Police as just another form of government control. So if something strange happened to you in the dark, there was a very real chance that either the police wouldn't believe you, wouldn't be able to help you, or wouldn't even bother reporting it because what's the point?
Right.
Like, this is the world. Like, again, hard to wrap your mind. It's not saying that our world is anywhere near utopia, but man, this was a time of just lawlessness. And if you were a young servant girl walking home at night, you're done. You were on your own. Like, your employer wasn't going to walk you home. The police weren't going to patrol your route. If something happened to you in those dark lanes, the assumption would be that you'd have been a quote unquote hysterical woman, or somehow quote unquote asking for it. Victorian society had a very convenient way of blaming women for the violence done to them, which, again, thank God that doesn't happen anymore. The people Spring Heel Jack targeted understood this perfectly. Young working class women, servants mostly, who had to walk home through those dark lanes after working in the houses of wealthier families. Their testimony was considered less reliable by authorities, but their safety just wasn't a priority. They were perfect victims. And there was a precedent for exactly this kind of panic. Between 1803 and 1804, Hammersmith had been terrorized by the quote unquote Hammersmith ghost, someone dressed in white who lurked in the churchyard and scared people. It got so bad that a local man named Francis Smith.
What did he do?
I didn't go super deep into it. And this is just a nice little a taste of what the mentality was back then. It even got so bad in that time that a local man named Francis Smith shot and killed someone that he thought was the ghost, which I love that the thought was, it's a ghost. Let me shoot it.
Dude,
that makes
honestly,
no sense.
I'm with him though. I get it.
I at least, here's what I say. I empathize. That dude's stupid, but I empathize.
Yeah, well, it turned out it wasn't a ghost, but an innocent bricklayer named Thomas Millwood, who was just wearing white clothes on his way home from work. And Smith was convicted of murder, though he was later pardoned for the crime.
Right, because technically,
he just thought it was a ghost.
Technically, he became a ghost, so...
Yeah, just like a guy in white clothes scared some people, and vigilantes formed,
and then he was
one
shot
of them
dead,
shot
so
and killed
technically
this
he
guy.
shot a ghost. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Right. We're all technically ghosts.
Yeah, we're all technically... You're not wrong. So when the rumors about Spring-Heeled Jack started circulating somewhere in late 1837, Londoners had every reason to be terrified because the city was dark, the police were useless, and there was historical precedent for phantom attackers being real enough for them to be worried about them being killed. Now, the first documented sighting of spring-heeled jack attacks began in September of 1837 in Barnes, which was then a village southwest of London. He wasn't called spring-heeled jack at this time. The early reports described him as, quote, a ghost, imp, or devil in the shape of a large white bull, or sometimes even as a bear. Like, the legend even doesn't even start up with him as a man. It's like a weird ghost animal.
Are bears English?
Maybe, yes.
I imagine bears?
So.
Like, I guess what I'm asking is, like, you know how, like, they'd, like, stuff animals and they'd look like shit in Victorian times? Like, these, like, doofy-ass lions and shit? Like, when people were saying bears, I wonder if they were thinking of some type of bear.
I think they were thinking of some kind of bear. I'm just looking at, like, there were native bears in the UK, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's kind of funny that they would say it's a bear.
Yeah. I imagine they probably, I mean, there's modern day, like, you know, communication and, like, you know, there's another country that they know of bears at this point.
Oh, yeah. Wow. This is super interesting. So bears in the UK were basically, the brown bear and stuff was likely killed off in the UK in the early Middle Ages. There were no bears in the UK during the Victorian era. So it's probably from Europe or Americas, or just
a ghost of a bear. So, you know, maybe that's what they were thinking. Because I imagine they have history, like maybe they wrote about it or something.
In my mind, I'm just thinking, like, maybe they think like any furry man-shaped thing is a bear. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I know what a bear looks
Roman
like.
Times, they have like a lot of art and stuff about bears in the area.
Yeah,
but they look like, I mean, you know, I don't know. They look like that bear that hangs out in front of fucking mechanics. You know what I'm talking? You know that one bear? He kind of looks like the Grateful Dead bear. He's just like this, like, weird bear. And if you know, you know. If you know, you know. If you're out there, you know.
Now, this being like the first kind of documented of what would eventually turn into spring, which is going to move forward, would become spring-heeled jackets. There might be some people out there who are thinking, because it was my thought too of, I thought the first sighting was someone by the name of Polly Adams, who got attacked at the Green Man Hotel in October of 1837. The story is supposedly Jack allegedly ripped off her dress, scratched her stomach, but this supposedly almost certainly did not happen, because this comes from a 1977 book by Peter Haining called The Legend and Bizarre Crimes of Spring-Heeled Jack. And when researchers tried to track down Haining's sources, he claimed he'd, quote, lent all his research material to a scriptwriter and it was subsequently lost. How fucking convenient. Like, this rumor that became like the first sighting of Spring-Heeled Jack came from an author who's
just a completely unsubstantiated thing.
Yeah. And this is all thanks to historian Mike Dash, who spent weeks going through every available newspaper from the period and found absolutely no contemporary account of a Polly Adams encounter.
It's crazy because I imagined this as like a mania type sighting, Spring-Heeled Jack. I never really looked into it that deep, but
we'll get into like why, but yeah, but like
that's interesting.
Yeah, we'll get into, yeah, it's fat, but like the Polly Adams is not real folklore. It's fake folklore. And it's important to flag this stuff as we go, because there are several Spring-Heeled Jack stories that got added to the legend decades later that simply have no historical bias to them whatsoever. But anyway, back to the Barnes in 1837. The attacks that we can verify involved a figure described in multiple forms. Like I said, sometimes as a muscular, this also sometimes is a muscular man with devilish features, large pointed ears and nose, and glowing eyes. Sometimes as a figure in armor with red shoes.
What do you mean devilish features?
I imagine like sharp chin, like a chin, like you think the classic artistic devil, like that kind of like
the round bottom of the chin beard that comes off. That
like a
point at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you dress like and
he has
playing
elvish
polo
ears.
If you go look at artistic pictures of Spring-Heeled Jack, he very much has that kind of what I would almost describe as like the modern day devil kind of look to him in a way. One businessman claimed he saw
a baseball star. Press.
One businessman claimed he saw this thing leap over the high railings of Barnes Cemetery, which, if true, would be an impressive as hell feat of athleticism, but not necessarily supernatural because they're not like absurdly unjumpably high. Over the next few months, the sightings would spread. 24 villages south and west of London started reporting similar encounters. In Cutthroat Lane, Isleworth, and yes, that's the actual name because I guess
named
Victoria
on the sign. Meet me down on Cutthroat Lane.
No, I don't know what that's from. Is that from a reference?
Just like I just mean like on the sign when you walk down the street.
Yeah, that's the actual name, because I guess they just didn't fucking around with naming things weird, creepy places.
That's
Jesse, why do you
hilarious.
why is your mouth just agape?
Sorry, you were so completely right. Spring Hill Jack looks like, if you in your mind were to imagine even the devil guy from Powerpuff Girls, like all those, that
is what he looks like in my mind.
Capital H-I-M, him from Powerpuff Girls. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like literally looks like what you would imagine. This probably is the origin of the stereotypical devil. At least how we see it today.
Devilish features. It wasn't just it's like literally like he just looks like the devil.
Like it's comical how absolutely like the pointed ears and like the very like straight tiny nose that like points out, the like long chin that has the whole thing's there. This is crazy. Even the outfit. I love this. This is wild.
Over the next few months, the sightings would spread. 24 villages south and west of London started reporting similar encounters. In Cutthroat Lane and Isleworth, a carpenter named Jones was attacked by what he described as a figure dressed in armor. He fought back, and 2 more figures joined in. Jones was badly beaten, and his clothes were torn to shreds. The pattern was starting to set up. Someone or multiple someones was targeting people in the dark, isolated areas, and the attacks were coordinated enough that they were spreading across different villages, and they were escalating. And clearly, whatever this is, whether it's like a group of people, whatever, it's more than one person that's doing this. But they start labeling it as a single individual. Now, by early January in 1838, the situation had gotten bad enough that someone decided to write to the Lord Mayor of London. That someone was anonymous, claimed to be a resident of Peckham, and their letter is one of the most important primary sources we have for this whole story. The Lord Mayor at the time was Sir John Cohen, who was a wealthy chandler, which is basically a candle merchant, who'd been made a baronet by Queen Victoria just 2 months earlier. And on January 9th, 1838, he held a public session at the Mansion House, which was a pretty big deal. And this was not the kind of thing Lord Mayors did for random urban legends. And Alex, I'm going to have you read this letter. It's kind of long, but for the sake of its source, I think it's just worth having it read full.
It appears that some individuals of, as the writer believes, the higher ranks of life have laid a wager with a mischievous and foolhardy companion, name as yet unknown, that he durst not take upon himself the task of visiting many of the villages near London in 3 disguises, a ghost, a bear, and a devil, and moreover, that he will not dare to enter gentlemen's gardens for the purpose of alarming the inmates of the house. The wager has, however, been accepted, and the unmanly villain has succeeded in depriving 7 ladies of their senses. At one house he rung the bell, and on the servant coming to open the door, this worse than brute stood in a no less dreadful figure than a spectre clad most perfectly. The consequence was that the poor girl immediately swooned, and has never from that moment been in her senses, but, on seeing any man, screams out most violently, "Take him away!" There are 2 ladies, which your lordship will regret to hear, who have husbands and children, and who are not expected to recover, but likely to become a burden on their families.
And I want to unpack this briefly because the letter's kind of doing something a little interesting. The anonymous writer basically is claiming that Spring-Heeled Jack isn't a ghost or a devil or anything supernatural. He believes he's like a wealthy aristocrat who made a bet with his equally wealthy friends. And he thinks that the wager is that he can't successfully terrorize the suburbs of London while dressed up in different costumes, and that the stakes, well, we'll get to the stakes in a second. Well, no, you know what? Fuck it. Let's go actually over it right now because the number is insane.
All right, yeah.
The supposed wager made is £5,000. And in 1838, that is the equivalent of roughly $600,000 today. We'll get over the details as where we learned about that number in a little bit. But these people allegedly were betting over $500,000 on whether their rich buddy could terrorize working class women effectively enough to drive them permanently insane. Like, that's the bet. And here's what, like, the letter,
crazy.
The letter writer specifies that the victims are servants and wives, women who have jobs, women who have families depending on them. The bet isn't just, quote, can you scare someone? It's, can you destroy someone's ability to function and earn a living? It's violence with economic consequences built in that this letter is kind of talking about.
Is this is a real confirmed letter and not just like a thing people thought was happening?
According to the source, Mike Dross, or what was his last name? Shit, I wrote it up here. Yeah. But again, it's also important. Like, the writer itself is anonymous, so there's no way to know that this is not coming from maybe one of the nobles or even from the mayor himself. We do not know where this letter comes from. I was just trying to figure out, like, is this we have like a documented source, or this is a thing someone said happened? No, this is a documented letter. This is an actual letter. Like, this is a letter that was that we have. The thing is like the letter itself is making claims about rich nobles, but without any evidence. It's almost like it's kind of pitching what he thinks is the idea because he doesn't believe it's a ghost.
Because it just sounds like something depraved that they would do, right?
Yes, exactly.
I was just trying to figure out if this was, let's say Joe Blow, am informing you about what's happening, or dearest comrades, let us defeat these working class. Like, I didn't know which of the two it was.
It's very much, it rings true a lot for some of today's conspiracy theories, right? Because whether or not this specific wager actually existed, the fact that someone was writing the letter and it could be plausible enough in their eyes that the higher up Victorian nobility would do this to poor people is speaking of like the suffering that these people are going through and what they expect out of those who sit higher station above them. And the letter specifically mentions, quote, individuals of the higher ranks of life. This is a class warfare kind of rhetoric. The writer is saying that rich people are literally using poor people as entertainment, that they're so bored and so insulated from consequences that they've gambled on whether one of their friends can traumatize working class women badly enough to drive them insane.
Thank God there's nothing like that happening anymore.
All done.
Never.
We're more enlightened people now.
Free.
Right.
We're free. We're free. And according to the letter, it's also working. 7 women have lost their minds. At least 2 are not expected to recover. They'll become, quote, a burden on their families, which in 1838 means they'll end up in an asylum or on the streets because there is no social safety net for these people. The Lord Mayor read this letter to a packed room. On January 11th, he showed the crowd, quote, a pile of letters from various places in and around London complaining about similar attacks. One writer reported that several young women in Hammersmith had been frightened into, quote, dangerous fits, and some were, quote, severely wounded by a sort of claws the miscreant wore on their hands, torn dresses and scratches. A committee was then formed to investigate this, and they were told that the Spring-Heeled Jack gang at the time, they're labeling it as a gang of people, because now we are talking about multiple people, was made up of rascals connected with high families, and that bets totaling £5,000 were at stake. £5,000, again, we said is like $600,000. The Lord Mayor tried to downplay the whole thing. He was skeptical, again, fair, but he couldn't just ignore it because the public was beginning to panic. The newspapers were beginning to pick up the story, and that's when everything kind of exploded. Because once the press got involved, as we've seen time and time and time again on the show, and especially once they gave it the Spring-Heeled Jack name, a legend building around him was inevitable, and the sightings went from localized.
Crazy again. It's crazy that they just called him Jack again.
I know, Jack again. It's almost like the go-to name for Anonymous back then, where John is like kind of our go-to today.
But even then, it's like you don't go like Evil John, and then we have like Deadly John. He's the next guy. And then we have like Murderer John out in the streets. It's, you know.
Now that the media picked it up and put it in the newspapers, that, of course, the legend just started building, and the sightings went from localized incidents to citywide hysteria. In that story we talked about early on with Jane Alsop, that would take place about 40 days after the Lord Mayor's public session talking about all of this. And that was in February 19th, 1838. Now we go to February 19th, 1838. Beer binder lane, rather. Beer binder would be cooler. That's all between
Bear Sighting Lane.
Yeah, Bear Sighting Lane. We've already covered the basics of what happened to Jane Alsop, but now let's get into some of the details, because Jane gave testimony to Magistrate Mr. Hardwick at Lambeth Street Police Office, and it was published in the Times on February 22nd, 1838. This is the single most detailed eyewitness account we have of supposedly Spring-Heeled Jack. And it's worth going through this carefully because there's a lot that doesn't match the supernatural legend. We're going to have Jesse take this one. This is Jane's own words, but it's lengthy. So make sure you do your voice a favor before you dive into anything.
Great. I won't do one. At about 8:45, she heard a violent ringing at the gate at the front of the house, and on going to the door to see what was the matter, she saw a man standing outside, of whom she inquired what was the matter, and requested he would not ring so loud.
Stop being loud. What do you want?
Yeah. The person instantly replied that he was a policeman and said, "For God's sake, bring me a light. We have caught Spring-Heeled Jack here in the lane." She returned into the house and brought a candle and handed it to the person, who appeared enveloped in a long cloak and whom she had first really believed to be a policeman. The instant she had done so, however, he threw off his outer garment and, applying the lighted candle to his breast, presented the most hideous and frightful appearance, and vomited forth a quantity of blue and white flames from his mouth, and his eyes resembled red balls of fire. So what we know from that, by the way,
fucking Christ,
is that the temperature of his fire breath is hotter than that of the temperature of his eyeballs. Now
correct, actually. You're correct.
That's
yes.
true.
Right.
Which makes sense because you got to see.
Right. Well, because the fire comes from the gut. Yeah. And then it goes up and out the mouth. And so the heat in the eyeballs is going to be less because it's
when he's breathing fire.
And the vitreous humor is
you
cool
think his eyes
eyeballs.
dim? You think his eyes dim when he's breathing fire?
Yeah, because they otherwise would be blue.
Yeah,
like a machine. Shoots out the blue, it becomes like, that's just science, dude. That's just
going
science.
into standby mode for a second.
Right.
Yeah.
From the hasty glance, which her fright enabled her to get of his person, she observed that he wore a large helmet, and his dress, which appeared to fit him very tight, seemed to her to resemble white oilskin.
Oilskin is a type of waterproofing on clothing back in that, like more sailors would wear that kind of like stuff.
In my mind, I think I know what that looks like. I'm pretty sure I've probably seen that in a
movie. Slick and shiny, almost looks like they're probably wet, but never dripping wet. Yeah.
Without uttering a sentence, he darted her and, catching her partly by her dress and the back part of her neck, placed her head under one of his arms and commenced tearing her gown with his claws, which she was certain were some metallic substance.
So while she never says like claw hands and stuff like that, it was a metallic, maybe just could have been a knife, which is more likely. From that alone, like the spur of the metal claws is born. You know, this is like, obviously it's not a supernatural demon. I mean, the fire breath, to me, trauma, like scared, maybe like the while he was breathing, she could see like his own breath in the cold or something, and it looked like fire breath. I don't know what that could have been. But the attacker is clearly pretending to be a cop, very kind of classic serial killer, like perpetual criminal activity. He claims to be a policeman who's captured Spring-Heeled Jack, which is already a panic in the city at this point. And by February 19th, the name Spring-Heeled Jack has been in the newspapers for over a month. Everybody now knows who he is. Everyone is terrified of him. So when a policeman shows up at your door and saying they've caught the guy, your first instinct is probably relief. Like, oh, good, they got him. He's not like here anymore. I don't have to worry about it. And then he asks for a light, but he doesn't have his own light source, which should have been a red flag.
Yeah, I was about to say, this is how you know times have changed, and as a society, we've become more suspicious. Because the first thing I thought of was, man shows up at my house, says he's a cop, and he needs my help. I'd be like, bro, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't need my help. I'm a citizen. You do your thing.
One of the theories are that actually what I find fascinating about this is that, and there's no way to prove this is real or not, but that he did spit flame. But the reason he did, because he was asking for a candle, and that when the candle brought, he had a fluid in his mouth that he could shoot out a flame to distract her.
That's pretty
and then
interesting.
Grab her.
Scare the shit out of her by blowing like the hairspray trick.
Yeah, literally, using the hairspray trick, essentially, to completely like stun her. But because once he had the candle, he throws off his cloak. He brings it close. She said it brings it to his chest, so he brings it close to his face, and then she describes what she sees, which is that slick suit, and then the fire happens. Like, another thing to talk about is like what Jane's description is actually very specific, and what sticks for Spring-Heeled Jack from here out. White oilskin suit, tight fitting, large helmet. again, that's also not something you really kind of throw together if what she's seeing is like of an actual person. Seems very planned. The helmet to cover the face, the oil slick, maybe to prevent him from catching fire, from like him blowing his own fire. Maybe it's not actual oil, but some sort of moisture to keep him from catching fire. Again, oilskin in 1838 was used for waterproof clothing. Sailors wore it. People who worked outdoors wore it. It ended up being like it was apparently a stiff, shiny, and in candlelight, it would have a supernatural gleam to it. Like he's wearing light itself, like dancing off of him. The helmet suggests either actual armor, which I imagine wasn't super hard to come across at that time still, or something more theatrical, stage armor maybe, the kind used in plays about medieval knights. And the metal claws Jane was so certain about were probably either a knife, maybe he had like metal tipped gloves at best, like with little pricks of metal, but I still think probably a knife. To me, this screams man planning to commit crime on woman that he knows is home alone right now. Because it's like old timey, I'm going to hide my identity stuff.
It's also crazy, like intruder type behavior that is insane.
Yeah, exactly. Like the attack itself. He grabs her, puts her in a headlock, starts tearing at her clothes.
It's like the Batman effect where it's going to like affect your perception of the person.
Yeah. And when you read her actual testimony, as opposed to the actual legend, there is no actual word about him leaping across the field. Jane's father noted actually in his own testimony that he just scampered across the field. There was no leaping and jumping like giant 9-foot gaps or anything, like not bounding over buildings. That was added afterward.
Admittedly, though, the leaping sells it much more than he scampered away.
Yeah, he
clambered away like Super Mario on a fence.
Yeah, the scamper, there's almost something a little like, you can hear that Scooby-Doo sound effect, like when they try to like run really fast. That's how I imagine his scamper.
And when he ran away, remember, the only reason he ran away is because they actually started shouting for the actual cops from the window, even if nobody was around to actually hear it. But the attacker, when he ran away, he left his cloak. He never came back for it. Jane's father said there must have been an accomplice because the person who attacked Jane ran away across the fields without touching his disguise. And for some reason that Jane's father made that believe that meant there was another one around. I don't know why he believed that. 9 days later, on February 28th, 1838, 18-year-old Lucy Scales and her sister are walking home through Green Dragon Alley in Limehouse after visiting their brother William, who was a butcher at the time. Alex, this is I'm going to have you take this encounter here. It's a shorter one.
Miss Scales stated that on the evening of Wednesday last, at about 8:30, as she and her sister were returning from the house of their brother, and while passing along Green Dragon Alley, they observed some person standing at an angle in the passage. She was in advance of her sister at the time, and just as she came up to the person, who was enveloped in a large cloak, he spurted a quantity of blue flame right in her face, which deprived her of her sight, and so alarmed her that she instantly dropped to the ground and was seized with violent fits, which continued for several hours.
Which again, that spraying of blue flame, I just can't help but let go of the idea it's their distraction technique. They have some sort of fluid in their mouth, and that's their whole shit as they approach somebody and like stun them or blind them with the fire so they can do what they want. Lucy's sister described the attacker as tall, thin, and gentlemanly appearance. He was carrying what looked like a police bullseye lamp, one of those like directional lanterns with a shuttered opening. And here, like the person didn't speak to her at all. He didn't try to grab her either. He didn't attempt to tear her clothes. He just appeared in the alley, waited for her to get close, spit blue flame in her face to blind her, and then walked away. Not leapt away, just walked away. And the sister was very clear about the fact that he walked away and didn't leap or run. So now we have 2 attacks, 9 days apart, and they're similar but not identical. Both involve blue flame, both involve a figure in a cloak, both happen in dark, narrow passages, but the MO seems different. Jane Alsop was grabbed and assaulted while Lucy Scales was blinded and left there. Jane's attacker tried to force his way back into the house while Lucy's attacker just disappeared. So either it's the same person refining their approach in typical serial killer fashion, as we've discussed many times on this, or we are looking at different people copycatting each other and doing it for different reasons. So if we talk about how you actually breathe fire, this is a trick that carnival performers and street entertainers have been doing for centuries back then. And Detective James Lee, which we'll get to a little bit more about him in a minute, investigated exactly this question after Jane Alsop's attack. He went to London Hospital, and the staff there demonstrated the trick for him. And according to the report, they did it by, quote, by blowing through a tube in which spirits of wine, sulfur, and another ingredient were deposited and ignited. So they have a tube that they shot it through and into like probably the candle. And then spirits of wine, basically what they're describing is ethanol, alcohol. It burns with a blue flame that's relatively smokeless. You don't need much of it, and it doesn't burn that hot compared to other fuels, which is why fire breathers don't immediately incinerate their mouths when they do it for their trick. A theater proprietor named Mr. Farrell also went on and testified about this. He said that dropping certain strong acids onto a sponge charged with spirits of wine would produce the kind of blue flames that Jane and Lucy described. The technique is pretty straightforward if you know what you're doing. You take a mouthful of this ethanol and you spray it into a fine mist either toward the flame source or using a tube that's connected to whatever you're using to blow it through there. The mist ignites in midair, creates a dramatic looking fireball, but the key is keeping the fuel as a mist and not a liquid, because if you spray liquid directly into a flame, you basically create a backflow that burns to you. So you have to mist it so it doesn't blow back on you. And is it dangerous? Oh yeah. Fire breathers today still suffer burns, especially when they're like learning the thing for the first time. But it's still not like supernatural. It's just chemistry, technique, and practice to master this. And if these are rich assholes who have plenty of time, I'm sure they have plenty of time to practice it. And remember, Spring-Heeled Jack specifically asked Jane Alsop for a candle. He needed an ignition source. A real demon wouldn't need to borrow fire from its fucking victim to blow like fire in its face if he was actually a devil. The police, to their credit, actually made an arrest pretty quickly. They grabbed a local carpenter named Thomas Milbank. Milbank had been boasting in the Morgan's Arms pub that he was Spring-Heeled Jack. He was wearing white overalls and a great coat that matched descriptions. And most damningly, the cloak and candle that Jane had given to her attacker were found near the Alsop house. The detective who made the arrest was...
Yeah.
The detective who made the arrest was James Lee, who was actually pretty famous at the time. He'd captured William Corder, who was the Red Barn murderer, which maybe one day we'll talk about. So this wasn't like some random beat cop. He was a cop who actually, in the 8 years of like cops exist, well, 9 at this point, he had a bit of a reputation for getting work done. And they had a witness too. A guy named James Smith, of course, testified that he'd overheard Milbank's companion say, quote, "It was rascally. I would not have had it done upon my account." And when Smith later ran into Milbank, the carpenter said to him, "What have you to say to Spring Jack?" Basically, what they're saying is like, you've got the costume, you've got the boasting, you've got witnesses. It's an open and shut
case.
Bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. And except Thomas Milbank was acquitted. And the reason why tells you everything you kind of need to know about Spring-Heeled. The legend of Spring-Heeled Jack had already overtaken the reality of what was actually going on. Because Jane Alsop insisted that her attacker had breathed actual breaths of fire. That was the defining characteristic. The blue flames, the vomited fire, the demonic appearance. And Thomas Milbank, when questioned, admitted that he could not breathe fire. It's true. He couldn't actually breathe fire. He had no idea how to do it.
So you think she just didn't want it to be him?
I think she truly thought it was a demonic force and she couldn't be convinced it was a man that was capable.
But not because of propriety, not because she didn't want to seem dumb. You think she genuinely thought it was fire?
I think she genuinely believed it was a demon. And like I said, the legend at this point had completely dominated the narrative of who Spring-Heeled Jack was. There was no wiggle room outside of the supernatural narrative as to what might be going on here.
That is crazy, dude.
He says Milbank also says he was blackout drunk on the night of the attack, and the Scale sisters had said their attacker was clearly sober. So he was let go. The fire-breathing element, the thing that was probably just a carnival trick, the thing that could be explained by basic chemistry, that same element protected who was actually the perpetrator. Because by the time Milbank went to trial, Spring-Heeled Jack wasn't just a guy in a costume anymore. He had become the supernatural entity that could breathe fire, could jump over tall buildings. And if you couldn't breathe fire, well, then you could not possibly be Spring-Heeled Jack. Yeah, and that's why it's like, it's important to know the legend had become more important than the crime at this point. Like, the actual perpetrator, they might have gotten right away, like immediately. But he could have walked, but he might have walked free because the mythology had already won. And it's 1830s. The willingness to believe in the supernatural was much more prevalent back then. We hadn't really crossed over. Like, we're approaching the era of spiritualism and like that kind of like backward back blow on that kind of thing. But still, now what we need to do, though, is talk about Henry de la Poya Beresford, the third Marquis of Waterford, because he's the prime historical suspect, and also because he's one of the most spectacularly terrible human beings of the fucking Victorian era.
Okay.
As I read about this guy, the Marquess, I think you say Marquis. It's I'll show you. How do you say this? I probably should have looked up how you said it instead of just having my brain say it when I'm reading it.
Could be Marquess.
Marquess, is that I copy pasted it.
I think it's Marquis.
Yeah, it could be Marquess. Yeah.
The Marquis was born in 1811, which made him about 26 years old during the Spring Heel Jack panic. He inherited his title and a massive fortune at age 15 when his father died, and he spent the next 33 years using that fortune to terrorize anyone within arm's fucking reach. The Oxford Dictionary of National Biography describes him like this, and Jesse, I'm just going to have you read this directly.
His favored companions were young sporting men, prize fighters, and prostitutes. Powerfully built, rich, and with an uncontrolled sense of humor, it amused him to challenge passers-by to fight him, to break windows, to upset literally apple carts. When, as frequently occurred as activities landed him in court, he laughed at and paid the derisory fees?
Derisory fees, yeah.
Which were designed to control the excess of the working class, not those of apparently limitless wealthy aristocracy. This guy is, what's his face? That dude on social media who goes walking through the street and he bumps into people on purpose and he has a bodyguard beat him up.
Oh, yep. And he has a bodyguard.
That guy who just got thrown in jail. That dude?
God.
That's this guy.
It's this guy. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy how there's still these people around.
Yeah, if there was social media, he'd be on it and universally hated. He actually lucked out because there wasn't social media.
And somehow loved because he's hated.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, and also, just a little the Britishism. It amused him to upset apple carts. Like, just that little description, I don't know, made me laugh. Like they're trying to be polite about it or some shit. So let's give you some more ideas or more examples of Marquess's idea of fun. He once kidnapped a cab driver at gunpoint and forced him to drive through London while the Marquess fired pistols in the air, just because, for entertainment. He would challenge random working class men to fight him, men who couldn't possibly win because he was an aristocrat who trained in boxing and they'd starve if they'd injured him. Then when he won, he'd laugh about it. He kept a pack of dogs that he'd set loose on people, not for hunting, just to scare them. And his hobby, his literal recreational activity, was upsetting apple carts. Like, that was his, like, when they say that was his favorite fucking thing to do. He would find a cart full of apples and just run over to it and flip it over, destroying someone's entire day's work, ruin their entire inventory, and probably, I imagine, leave them unable to feed their families for the week because of that. He, like, this man had an annual income of £60,000, over $7 million in modern terms, and he just spent it on destroying fruit and terrorizing people. Honestly,
there's a lot of rich people right now who this is the exact same thing. Let's not even pretend. It's like that has never changed. The idea that I have enough money to do anything, I've done everything, so all that's left is to be a complete asshole.
One point, he got him and his like cronies to dangle a cop over a well just because it was funny. What? The most comic book villain shit in the world. When he was finally fined for the Melton Mowbray incident, 100 pounds was all he was fined, the equivalent of about $12,000 today. And that was a coordinated assault, vandalism, destruction of property, attacking multiple police officers, breaking someone out of jail, and terrorizing an entire town. He paid 100 pounds for that. He paid it the same day without blinking, literally just like walked out. The Hobart Town Crier, this is an Australian newspaper, wrote in October of 1838 that his name in many quarters is regarded with as much terror as that of Spring-Heeled Jack himself. But the incident that really demonstrates what kind of person this guy was is the painting the town red incident. And yes, this is where that phrase actually comes from. On April 6th, 1837, 5 months before the first Spring Heel Jack sightings, the Marquess and several of his aristocratic friends got drunk after the races at Croxton Park. They rode into the town of Melton Mowbray and decided to redecorate. They painted the White Swan Inn sign red. They grabbed a watchman, held him down, and painted his face red. They attacked a toll keeper, nailed up his toll house, and then painted it red. They destroyed property throughout the town, painting it red. When the police tried to stop them, they beat multiple officers, painting some of their faces, you guessed it, red. One of the Marquess's friends was arrested, so they broke 3 locks, beat 2 more constables, threatened murder to free him. This was the event that painting the town red comes from. A coordinated violence, a gang of wealthy men using their physical strength and immunity from consequence to inflict terror on a working class town for entertainment. The Marquess was fined, again, £100 for this. $12,000 in today's money was what he was charged for this shit. His annual income, again, was over $7 million dollars in modern times. The fine was quite literally pocket change. The judge knew it, the Marquess knew it, and he walked out allegedly laughing. He was described by the Belfast newsletter as, quote, probably the strongest man in the kingdom, and his activity was equal to his vigor. So we're talking about someone who was both powerful, agile, and ungodly rich for the time. Like, that's where we're at. So the evidence linking him to Spring Heel Jack includes the fact that he was in London during the 1837 attacks. The contemporary newspapers directly accused him. Witnesses reported seeing a gold filigree W on the attacker's costume. And Reverend E. Cobham Brewer in 1880 directly accused Waterford of, quote, springing on travelers unawares to amuse himself. Like, it maybe was this guy. Like, it maybe was this wealthy asshole whose whole life was so, like, driven to just torturing people. But there are obviously also problems with this theory. First, the Waterford Chronicle reported that the Marquess attended the St. Valentine's Day Ball at Waterford Castle on February 14th, 1838. He'd have had to race back to London, which was about 300 miles away, in 5 days to then attack Jane Alsop on the 19th. Not impossible, but it'd be a very tight schedule. Second, the way more important thing, the Marquess of Waterford died on March 29th, 1859. He fell off his horse during a hunt at Corbally in Ireland, cracked his skull, dead at 48 years old. And the Spring Heel Jack sightings would then continue for another 45 years after his death. So either the Marquess wasn't Spring Heel Jack, or he was only the first Spring Heel Jack, and the legend had become so potent that copycat attackers kept it alive long after the original was dead and in the ground. Then, before we get into the later sightings, I want to address the murder that allegedly happened in 1845, because it's probably the darkest story in Spring Heel Jack's legend, and it's almost certainly complete fiction, and another one of those that perpetuated his legend so strongly. The story goes, a 13-year-old prostitute named Maria Davis was walking along the banks of the Follies Ditch in Jacob's Island, and I just don't like saying a 13-year-old prostitute. It just sucks. That's just what it was like back in the day. Jacob's Island was one of the worst slums in London. The Morning Chronicle called it the very capital of cholera, and Charles Dickens set parts of Oliver Twist there. Yeah, the very capital of cholera.
The very capital of cholera.
Beautiful line. It was a nightmare of open sewers and rotting buildings, and according to the legend, Spring Heel Jack appeared, grabbed Maria, threw her into the ditch, which was basically an open sewer, and he stood there and watched her drown in the filth. It would mark a major escalation in Jack's behavior from assault to murder. This was like the first murder legend. But there's absolutely no contemporary evidence that this ever happened. And like the other one, this is another Peter Haining invention from the 1977 book. Historian Mike Dash went looking for, again, any sort of newspaper report.
That's so fucking bold of a thing to throw in.
Yeah, shout outs to the people who did the actual work. Again, Mike Dash did an amazing amount of work on this. He went looking for newspaper reports, any police record, any coroner's inquest from 1845 mentioning Maria Davis or a Spring Heel Jack murder, and there was nothing, zero. The story doesn't appear until the late 1970s when the book comes out. Now, does that mean no one died because of Spring-Heeled Jack? No. Lucy Scales collapsed and went into fits. The anonymous Peckham letter claimed women had been driven insane and would become a burden to their families. In Victorian England, that kind of psychological trauma could absolutely lead to institutionalization, which is kind of like the equivalent of death. But the specific incident with Maria Davis appears to be complete fiction. And I wanted to flag this because it's important to separate the documented history from the elaborated legend, and to keep, like we did with the Jersey Devil. I really want to get to the core of this.
Obviously fake some shit is that just keeps getting repeated.
Yeah, but
like when you look into it,
if an author writes a book and he says he has sources, a lot of the time I do that. Like, I trust a lot of books that are written that are like as sources. I mean, I'm not a historian, I'm not writing a book myself about things, but I can imagine reading a book written in 1977 where he claims he has these sources. Nobody bothers. And when he's finally asked about his sources decades later, he's like, oh, they were gone. I don't know where they are anymore. No, but it makes sense to me, right? Like you, unless you're specifically looking into the things he's talking about, no one's really going to double check. That's why it's always important, if you're reading about studies, read about multiple studies in that same topic and see where the studies read how they were done, where they're, that kind of thing. But this is just about Spring-Heeled Jack. Nobody really cared until Mike over here took care of it. Not me, this other guy. The Spring-Heeled Jack sightings didn't stop after 1838. They went quiet for a while, but then flared up again in the 1870s in different parts of England. In 1872, there was the Peckham ghost reports of a figure terrorizing that area. In April and May of 1873, Sheffield had its park ghost sightings with people claiming someone was jumping out at them in the darkness. These would be, at best, copycats, but probably unrelated pranks that are just getting tied to Spring-Heeled Jack. Or they could literally just be mass hysteria, people seeing what they expected to see because legend was still circulating in penny dreadfuls and newspapers at the time. And in 1877, something happened that's much harder to dismiss because it's involved the British Army, multiple witnesses, official reports, and even gunfire. Aldershot Barracks in Hampshire, March 1877. This is a major military installation. We're not an isolated village in the dark. This is a place with, we're talking professional soldiers, armed guards, official protocols, patrols, and Spring-Heeled Jack, or someone claiming to be Spring-Heeled Jack, decided to attack the sentries. Jesse, I'm going to have you read the military newspaper account of this event.
Someone or other appears to have made up his mind to play some rather questionable pranks with the sentries at this camp while on night duty. On Tuesday night last, a sentry was on duty at the North Camp, and about midnight, someone came towards him who refused to answer to the usual challenge of, "Who comes there?" And after dodging about the sentry box in a fantastic fashion for some little time, made off with astonishing swiftness. Not, however, until the sentry had loaded his rifle and fired, but without any effect. Spring-Heeled Jack, as he has been termed in camp, then paid a similar visit to the sentry on duty near the cemetery, who also fired, but alas, without hitting the object.
So dangerous.
You're just shooting at a dude who goes there. And then the guy's like, I'm out of your mind.
Is it weird that out of all of that, the one thing I took away was, at some point, we moved on from who comes there to who goes there.
I did. I also had that same thought. I'm like,
this is like some squirty cream type shit. We just don't have this anymore. I feel like it makes you automatically sound British if you say it.
Who comes there?
Who comes there?
But yeah, basically a figure approaches a military guard at night. At midnight, the sentry issues a challenge, shoots at him, misses, comes back again, shoots at him, misses. Then the legend goes on to say that it dodges around the bullet or it's moving in a way that's inhuman. They say astonishing swiftness, and then it goes to a different sentry post near the cemetery, and the exact same thing happens. The Times reported on April 28th, 1877 that, quote, the ghost had slapped one sentry several times around the face before fleeing across the terrain with astonishing bounds. That's not what the report initially said, but the newspaper added a little
bounds
bit.
Is so bold, dude.
And slapped a sentry multiple times in the face before getting out of there. The Illustrated Police News in September then gave more details. The attacker's method was to climb onto the sentry box and pass his hand, which was arranged to feel, quote, as cold and clammy as that of a corpse, over the face of the sentinel. The sentries had been ordered to fire on sight. So apparently he's like climbing over and just putting his hand in their face and being like, oh, we can't see what you're doing. I don't really know what the fuck is happening. Now here's what, like, for me makes this interesting from a historical perspective, because we actually know who probably was fucking with them. Not necessarily in the supernatural bounding across and like leaping, but there might have been somebody actually fucking with them. Who else but another noble, Lord Ernest Hamilton, who served with the 60th Rifles at Aldershot, later wrote that he believed the culprit was Lieutenant Alfrey, described as, quote, a very big and powerful man, but extraordinarily active, which I don't know what that means. Once the sentries were issued, extraordinarily active.
So probably you would think he'd be slow, but for a man of his size, he was quite fast, I guess is probably the vibe.
I think it means he's annoying.
Once the sentries were issued,
quite active, isn't he?
It's quite an active lad. I wish he'd just relax a little. Once the sentries were issued live ammunition with explicit orders to shoot on sight, the appearances stopped. No court-martial record exists, which suggests that if it was Lieutenant Alfrey, he either wasn't caught or the army decided not to prosecute one of their own officers for terrorizing their own soldiers. Prank gone wrong. But think about what this tells you about the Spring-Heeled Jack phenomenon by 1877. It's been 39 years since Jane Alsop was attacked. The Marquess of Waterford has been dead for 18 years, and yet the name Spring-Heeled Jack is so culturally now embedded that when someone starts attacking sentries at the military base, the newspapers immediately just start calling it a Spring-Heeled Jack phenomenon. The legend has completely divorced itself from any specific person. It's become a template at this point. If you want to terrorize people in the dark, if you want instant notoriety, you put on a costume, you become Spring-Heeled Jack, and you do it. The original might have been one person. It just feels
yellow journalism-y at this point. Like, yeah.
But that was the Jersey Devil. It was Ben Franklin trolling somebody he hated. And that's how the Jersey Devil came into fruition. Like the original could have just been a person, but by now it's just a role that someone can play. And with the legend becoming self-sustaining, let me give you an example of how insane the fictional Spring-Heeled Jack became versus reality. This is from an 1878 Penny Dreadful, which is a cheap serialized fiction that cost 1 penny per installment back then. And Jesse, I'm going to have you read this bizarre description of like what he is. But like this is just what they saw him as at this point in
this
time.
Is one of those. This is basically what you would get if you were like a Reader's Digest level thing. Kind of what it is, really.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is.
It's like a comic book.
Comic-y.
It's like a nasty little comic book.
It's a Penny Dreadful. It's like a nasty little comic book.
A nasty little comic book with titties.
Okay, all right.
With eyes like burning coals and breath of blue flame, Spring-Heeled Jack alighted upon the church steeple, his terrible laugh echoing across the rooftops of London. No wall could contain him, no weapon could harm him, for he was neither man nor beast, but a creature of the shadows themselves, born from the fears of the wicked and the nightmares of the innocent. With a single bound, he crossed the Thames itself, landing upon the Tower of London, where he mocked the guards before vanishing into thin air, leaving only the smell of brimstone and the sound of his demonic cackling.
That was a journalist who said that?
This is a Penny Dreadful.
Yeah, this is they're selling
a journalist.
They're having a good time with it. Yeah,
it's serialized fiction, is what this is.
It probably came with an image of like the Spring-Heeled Jack, but then like also a woman he's holding with like half ripped clothes, and like just a little too much leg is showing.
And I mean, just think about where we are now. From where it started with Jane Alsop's testimony to where this thing is in the lore at this point. But the Penny Dreadful version is what people remembered. The Penny Dreadful version is what became the legend. And so by the time you get to 1877 or even 1904, which we will very soon as we wrap this all up, people aren't reporting what they actually saw. They're reporting what they think Spring-Heeled Jack is supposed to look like based on 40 years of sensationalization and fiction. There is one more incident from 1877 that's worth mentioning because it does add another weird layer to the physical evidence. In November, there was sightings at Newport Arc in Lincoln. A mob gathered and chased the figure. That's like everybody saw him. Multiple witnesses reported that when people fired at it, they heard the distinct sound of bullets hitting metal. Now, on one hand, this could support the idea that the attackers were wearing some kind of armored costume and they were getting protected by that. Because, I guess Victorian stage armor, though, wasn't sophisticated, but it wouldn't be hard to strap some sheet metal on you, I guess. But on the other hand, this is exactly the kind of detail that gets added in urban legends. Like, I heard bullets hit him and it sounded like metal. It makes the story better. It makes it more fun to tell your friends or tell your family. It makes it more mysterious. And once a few people say they heard it, everyone who was there will remember hearing it.
Yeah,
because human memory is fallible.
I was thinking about that it reminds me, at least this moment you're talking about, reminds me of the very infamous "Who saw the leprechaun say yeah?" And that video where everyone sees the leprechaun.
People just get hype. About it.
They get hype. Yeah.
And that's the problem with analyzing Spring-Heeled Jack sightings from the 1870s onward. It's like we're 30 to 40 years past the original incidents now. Most people reporting sightings weren't alive in 1838, and they know Spring-Heeled Jack from Penny Dreadfuls and not much from the actual sources where they came from. So when they see something strange, they're not reporting what they saw. Like I said, they're reporting a legend that they've been told over the many years. Now we're going to move to the final part in 1904. We jump forward to the 20th century. It's been 67 years. 6-7.
We can just sit on that for a little bit.
You can see the great visual comedy.
All of the 14-year-olds listening right now are so excited.
We all got sad at ourselves when he said it.
It's been 67 years since Barnes Common. Victoria is dead. Edward VII is on the throne. The Victorian era is officially over. And in 1904, Spring-Heeled Jack appears one last time in Everton, Liverpool. The Liverpool Echo, September 21st, 1904, reported that, quote, considerable commotion was caused yesterday in William Henry Street, Everton, on a rumor that a sort of, and it quotes within the article, Spring-Heeled Jack was pursuing his antics in that neighborhood. The news of the world had been more detailed. Quote, Everton, Liverpool is scared by the singular antics of a ghost to whom the name of Spring-Heeled Jack has been given because of the facility with which he has escaped by huge springs, all attempts of his would-be captors to arrest him. He is said to pay particular attention to ladies. So far, the police have not arrested him, their sprinting powers being inferior. The cops are just not fast enough, I guess.
Let's get alive.
Yeah, exactly. That last line, I think, is like peak British understatement. The police can't catch him because they're slower, but said in the most polite, eloquent way. But the detail that really captures people's imagination is the rooftop jumping. Multiple witnesses reported seeing the figure bounding from house to house across the rooftops of Everton. This becomes the iconic image, Spring-Heeled Jack silhouetted against the sky, leaping across impossible distances with crowds watching from below. Except here's what actually fucking happened, according to a later eyewitness named Mrs. A. Pierpoint. She later told the Liverpool Echo in 1967, 63 years after the fact, so take this with the appropriate skepticism, obviously, that the 1904 figure was, quote, a local man slightly off balance mentally. He had, quote, a form of religious mania and would climb onto rooftops crying out, my wife is the devil! When police closed in, he'd jump from one rooftop to another to escape them.
What the fuck? My wife is the devil?
He'd get on the roof and just start screaming, my wife is the devil, until the cops were there, and then he'd just jump rooftop to rooftop to get away.
God bless him. God bless him.
If this is true, and I kind of believe it probably is, then the final Spring-Heeled Jack sighting was just a mentally ill man having a religious crisis on the rooftops while a crowd watched in the newspapers then sensationalized it. But at this point, doesn't really fucking matter if it's true, right? Like, because by 1904, Spring-Heeled Jack is already a 67-year-old legend. The people who saw him in Everton don't need to know the truth. They already know what they're seeing. They know the story. And so the story continues. So there's let's talk a little bit at the end here about the leaping, the bounds and stuff. Obviously, we know he didn't do any of that stuff. I just skip to the theories. I want to where did this actually all come from? To me, I think it pretty much speaks for itself. While there are many theories that Spring-Heeled Jack is something that we've covered in the past, actually last episode, a form of thought form, a ghost or a poltergeist made real because of the collective belief that he is real, whether that's true or not, maybe that's what he became later on. But originally, I don't really feel there's much wiggle room to say that seems likely it may have been a noble who was just a fucking terrible human being who then spurred on copycats. Once I read in Mike's work about how easy it is to miss the flame, to me, that was the moment the whole legend made sense. It no longer felt supernatural. And I was like, now I'm more curious about why and who these people are. And so we have theory A, multi-generational hoax. People say this is the most accepted historical explanation, that the first Spring-Heeled Jack was likely wealthy prankster, possibly the Marquess of Waterford, possibly one of his friends, possibly multiple people coordinating attacks and making a big old betting pool of money about whether they could do anything for it. And this is where I think the strongest evidence sits. Then we have theory B, the mass hysteria theory. The theory suggests that after the initial panic in 1837 to 1838, most subsequent sightings were either misidentifications of ordinary things or the result of people seeing what they expected to see in the dark streets as they got jumped. Dark streets, poor lighting, cultural conditioning from penny dreadfuls. You hear footsteps behind you in a dark alley. You turn, you see a man in a cloak, which is all not that uncommon at the time, and your brain just fills in the rest before you have a chance to understand what you're looking at.
Seems so crazy, but you're right. Like I've seen it happen 1,000 times with the Zodiac killer, with anyone. They're just like, oh, I saw him. And most of the cops are like, most of them think they saw him.
Most of them think they do, and you can't convince them otherwise.
This is the inherent problem with everything we cover on this show, is this is also a thing for ghosts, aliens, cryptids. Like, people will say, I saw it, and they didn't see anything, but because they're preconditioned by society or the things they're interested in, like, oh, I heard about shadow people, so now I'm like, do I see shadow people? Like that kind of thing. And it snowballs, and it makes it so I have to sit here and be like, well, I guess if 1% of people did see it for real, it's fine. But I genuinely think most people are like, I didn't see anything, but I'm going to say because, like, I think I did.
Or just even look back to the drones, right? When people started looking at the sky more, who never really looked at the sky, and the amount of people who were like seeing things that are literally the most normal shit, but they think it's something else because they're just not conditioned to look up that way. And so, like your shadow person thing, if once you're told something about something and that's what you're looking for.
Well, because it's an explanation for what the thing could be. So it's what you go to first rather than a pause and being like, hold on, what was that? It was like, oh, shadow person.
Right. And so like maybe Spring-Heeled Jack started with a few real attacks in those first couple of years. And then the rest of the 60 some odd years are cultural phantom phenomenon, because we do know that Jane Alsop was really assaulted before Spring-Heeled Jack was a huge thing. Lucy Scales for the same reason. But the sentries at Aldershot were really attacked by a prankster. But there's no way to, they could all be separate things. And obviously the last, more fun theory, even if less believable one, the high strangeness of it all. The theory that, what if Spring-Heeled Jack was something genuinely anomalous? A theory that, like, even if he wasn't a ghost to understand initially, that he wasn't fully this devil creature, that he was created. A tulpa theory. Tulpa, which we talked about last episode, the thought form. Maybe that's what he became. But obviously the problem with this theory is the same problem with all paranormal theories. As Jesse just said, it will require us to accept that the laws of physics are not are optional on some level or misunderstood in some way.
We are wrong about something for sure.
We are wrong about something, and that all of this can be explained that way. Because even if we say, reality isn't fully understandable, maybe this is possible, majority of the sightings are still not that. Like, it still isn't that. I think, as always, the human explanation is the scariest one. Just a wealthy fucker who can go to court and pay anything and get away with it.
To be honest, it's probably a little of all.
Yeah. Well, the origin of them all. So that's where we leave the story of Spring-Heeled Jack with those final theories. Obviously, I'm curious your thoughts, but kind of here's what I keep coming back to. I keep coming back to the fact that I think it started as somebody or copycat assaults. that the records, and particularly Jane saying she knows he breathed fire, which then made sure that nothing could be admissible in court unless they breathed fire, and it just snowballed from there. But that is the end of the Spring Heel Jack story. And boys, I'm curious your thoughts on Spring Heel Jack. What did you know about Spring Heel Jack before we dove into this? Because I knew
nothing.
Basic stuff.
I knew kind of that he existed, and that's about it. Like, I knew that he was around. I knew something about fire being part of it. I know we've talked about him on the show briefly before.
Yep. Yeah,
But-
he's been brought up a couple times in random episodes.
Yeah, he seems just kind of like, I don't want to say a performance artist, but like somebody who's postmodern in the sense that they want to be viewed by society based on what they're doing in a certain way.
A little
and that there's
jokery is what you're saying?
not necessarily. I feel like there was a attempt, like, how do I put this? Like, if I wanted to rob a bank, I would like do something really obvious to my face, like put a big scar across the front of my face or something like that, so that people would only be thinking about the scar instead of what I look like. And I feel like Spring Heel Jack's look is kind of just like so crazy because it's just easy to like completely like anonymize yourself by doing that.
Slap a helmet on and then stun them with fire. The only thing they're going to remember is the fire part.
Yeah, and it kind of feels like that thing about like animals, rats or whatever, getting put into closer and closer spaces and having to like turn on each other a bit, and like their like group dynamics change. And I feel like the awareness of being around people and the fact that you can't escape people and stuff like that, and that like in some ways there's like rules of society that you're going to like fall through the cracks on. Yeah. I think alone is enough to inspire somebody to do something like Spring Heel Jack, just based on how any real actual crazy person that I've ever seen has acted in the streets. There's a bit of a flamboyant flair to it. I don't know how else to describe it than
the
that.
Confidence.
There's a notion that you're going to be observed, you know? And I think that's the big thing. And whether it's a fucking asshole or not, I think there was a little bit of derangement involved, and
100%.
Somebody really willing to like stir some shit up, see what happens. It could be even newspaper selling. Like it could be 100%.
Like, no, we watched as newspaper added details actively as we went through the timeline.
That they just made it for the newspaper, like newspaper made it to report on it.
Right. But I mean, I think that to wrap this up in a nice little bow, I think Spring Heel Jack, like many monsters or urban legends or even cryptids, may not have been a monster that actually existed, but it was a monster the people of the time needed to explain the monsters they already had. It's a way for them to frame people who are, what to look out for. It get like a cryptid keeping people away from the water. It kept women more on their toes, walking in dark alleyways, because Spring Heel Jack might jump out at you. And with that neat little bow and a nice historical dive into Spring Heel Jack, a very Victorian cryptid ghost thing, we wrap today's episode. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Hope everybody enjoyed their Thanksgiving. We'll have to do a mini-sode at patreon.com/Chilluminati pod, where you can get a bunch of extra content, including mini-sodes every week.
The best.
We appreciate you. We love you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Anyway, me and my wife were sitting outside indulging on our porch one night, enjoying ourselves. I needed to go to the bathroom, so I stepped back inside, and after a few moments, I hear my wife go, "Holy shit, get out here." So I quickly dash back outside, and she's looking up at the sky in awe. I look up too,